Good evening. It's been a really long few days. Um, I spent most of the week trying to finish up a project I was working on uh, in Palo Alto. So we were sort of at the end of that project, and we started off with a boatload of people, as often happens to these projects, and I got to be one of the lucky few that got to clean up the last few issues at the end. And I do say lucky because when you're a consultant, utilization is really important. So I managed to get that. Besides that, to be fair, I was enjoying the project, learning new things. But that came to a head today. So it is now, what time is it? 2:30 in the morning. So I finished that project up. I've still probably got a dozen things left to do on my task list that I want to get done before the morning, going into the weekend. Not the least of which is I got a few online classes for my company that I'd like to finish taking. I'll probably push that off till tomorrow. Um, the other things that came up this week. First, in the middle of all this, as busy as I am, my storage server blew up. So I've had this QNAP TS451 that I purchased late third quarter, early fourth quarter last year, and I've used it here at the office. I had 16 terabytes of data in it, and I decided to go with the NAS appliance for a couple of reasons, and I'll probably do some coverage of that. But one of which was ease of setup. Now, I'm certainly no slouch when it comes to building out servers and creating systems, so that's not an issue. But I do like how you can just plug in the drives, turn on the services you want, download whatever apps you're going to use, and it's up and running. It's completely headless. So you plug it in your network. It gave you a little app you run, finds your IP address, you log in, set your security settings, set what you want, and it runs, and I'll certainly do an overview of that. So that part was very good. I also like how QNAP, and I believe Synology does something similar, they have sort of a cloud relay server, so I don't need to necessarily open up ports into my office network to remotely access my files or my services. That could create a security hole where people come in. So what they do is they have sort of a relay server. In QNAP's case, it's myqnapcloud.com. You go there, you log in, and any devices you've registered, you then have the ability to access files from them. And what happens is your server in your office actually makes an outbound call to QNAP, and you, from wherever you are, in my case it's typically a hotel or a client's office, I make an outbound call to QNAP, and they automatically connect my remote access to my office server, and files move. It's brilliant. I like it. It's secure, and they don't charge you extra for that. That's part of what you get when you buy one of their products. So I really liked that, and I enjoyed that. In addition, they have a bunch of mobile applications where you can view photographs from your NAS, stream music from your NAS, play movies directly from your NAS, and if you're planning on going offline, like I do a lot of international travel, a lot of international flying, I tend to download some movies to my iPad so that I can watch them on an airplane, especially in some cases where you could be on a 10-hour flight that they didn't bother to put an in-flight entertainment system in there. And the Wi-Fi in the airplanes, there's not enough bandwidth to stream anything. In addition, any client documents I may have on a NAS, I typically would download to have local on either my iPad or my computer, so I don't have to try to access them when I get where I'm going. They're just there for me. So I kind of like that. But so all these great things I'm saying about this product, where did it all fall apart? Okay, so I wish I had it here to show you. It's off for repair right now. The model I had, and you can look it up. I'll put a link down below. Was a TS451. I believe it had a TS451 Plus as well. It's a 4-bay NAS running on a Celeron processor. The 451's a dual-core Celeron. The 451 Plus is a quad-core. And you could put, I think, up to 4 or 8 gigs of RAM in them. The 451 came with half a gig, and the 451 Plus came with 2 gig. They're small little headless boxes. They're quiet. Just plug-and-play drives, hot swappable. So fast forward about 5 months into ownership, all of a sudden my NAS disappears off the network. Of course, I'm traveling, so I don't know what the heck happened. I get back to the home office, I look, and the thing's in a constant reboot cycle. And for the few minutes it came up before it rebooted, I was able to log in, and I realized my credentials were no longer working. I had to log in with the factory default, which that bothers me too. I don't really want a server on the network that went back to factory defaults. But I got in and I realized what was happening is it kept, every time I rebooted, it was resetting back to factory default. So contacted QNAP technical support, had to send it back to them, realized what that was a faulty reset switch. There's a reset switch on there, just like any PC. You push the button, it resets it in case you get locked out or if the operating system hangs, which is rare. But in this case, if you hold down the reset button, I forget how many seconds, but a certain period of time, it resets to factory default. And the reason that's in there is because if you forget your password or your credentials, you'd basically have a brick device. So you need some way to, if you have physical access to the device, you need to have some way to be able to basically say, hey, blow away all the security settings, let's start from scratch. Well, what happened is the switch was faulty. It was constantly causing a factory reset. So I packaged this whole thing up in a box. At my expense, I sent it back to QNAP. Now, it's not, I wish it was that simple, actually. What happens is you call up their tech support people, which to their credit are very helpful. They want to help. They answer the phone. They help you diagnose it. So that part's good. But then when you get to a point where they tell you, yeah, I can't help you over the phone, you have to send that to us, you need something called an RMA number, Return Materials Authorization. And if you try to send a device to a corporation without an RMA number, their shipping department gets it. They look at the box and they say, hey, where's the RMA number? If there's not there, it goes back in the mail back to you and you still have a broken unit. They don't want you just randomly sending stuff to them. So they send you this form to fill out, which you name, address, company name, device, purchase date. At some point when you register your product, you have to provide them a receipt so you know when your warranty is valid. And I think it's 1 year from the factory. So you fill all that out, you send it back to them, and in theory, in 24 hours, you get an RMA number. So that first time, it took them a week and a bit of pestering by me to finally get that RMA number. And I did, and I packaged it up, and I sent it to them. And I think it was like 3 or 4 weeks, the device finally came back to me, functional. And I was like, I was happy, it's great, but I mean, I've got backups scattered on different drives. I've also got cloud backups of some critical files, encrypted, of course, which would take forever in a day to download. Remember, this is a 16 terabyte unit, and there's probably about 12 terabytes of data on it, virtual machines and whatnot. So I get the thing all set back up. I'm happy. I'm relieved. I've got access to my data. Life's good. So first I'm thinking, wow, I had a server that after 5 months blew up. That's not good, but there's such high praise for these units. I'm sure it's kind of a fluke, right? So I get confident. I'm working through it. Of course, I keep my backup strategy in place just in case. I'm thinking at this point, the only thing that's going to happen wrong is the building will burn down. I've had computers run for years without problems. Until last week, still within the first year of ownership of this product, it disappears off my network again. So I go to the server closet, open up, no power lights. Try to power it up, nothing. Call QNAP tech support. Oh yeah, you have to RMA it and send it to us. Great, so my server's down again. So in 1 year, I've had this fairly expensive server appliance, network attached storage unit, go bad twice. So I pulled the drives out. You never ever send your data to them. They don't need it and they don't want it, and it's not a good idea anyway. I package it up and send it to them. Now, every time I've got to send this thing to them, it cost me probably about $35 in packaging and shipping to make sure it gets there. Now they pay for shipping in reverse, but now I've got a unit, and remember, this is not a super high-end unit that they've got. It's basically a small business unit. It's only a 4-bay unit, so it retails about $400 to $500. If you get it on sale, you do good. But now I've spent in the first year $80 just on shipping it back to them. Oh, by the way, they did get me an RMA number within 48 hours this time, so that helped. So I sent it off to them, and it's still gone. But at this point, I'm not sure I'll trust it. I mean, you have a server go down twice in the first year. That kind of you lose confidence in it. And it got me thinking, for all the ease of setup and all the great features that this thing's got in it, every time it breaks, I've got to send it off to them. And of course, I'm paying shipping. There's downtime of a few weeks. And what happens when I'm out of warranty? Now I'm going to have to ship it to them, get an estimate, pay to repair. So I started thinking, maybe I should be building my own server. So I'll lose the advantage of the prepackaged apps. I'll lose the advantage of their cloud redirector. And of course, the NAS appliances are built to be low power, so I'll lose the advantage of the low power consumption. I mean, I can build a low power server, but you're probably not going to get to the level of what a Synology or QNAP is. But the big advantage I do get, if a logic board fails, I can run down to Micro Center, Fry's, Newegg, whatever. We got all these places around here that I can go and buy a logic board. Hard drive goes bad, boom, I can get a new hard drive in there. Power supply, same thing. I'm not at the mercy of a different company to repair something that I'm quite capable of fixing myself if I can only get the bloody parts for it. So that's what I kind of did today. I mean, I figured I had 3 choices here when I get this thing back, because I can't keep having 3 to 4 week downtimes on my critical data. Even if I mean, here's the thing, I got a backup. I got plenty of backups. I'm not losing data, but where do you put it? I mean, you lose a 16 terabyte server. You got to put that data somewhere. I don't have an extra 16 terabytes just sitting on my ass somewhere, ready to put data on. So I've got a couple choices. I can either continue using my NAS appliance, in which case, to have confidence in it, I'll have to go out and buy a second unit just to keep as a hot spare. So if it dies, you can replace it. I was down at Fry's today picking up some parts on an unrelated project, and I happened to mention I'm thinking about building a server. And the guy was saying one of the things you can do if you buy it off them, and I'm sure other retailers have the same policy, if you buy it off them, you can buy the extended warranty, and apparently if the thing goes belly up on you, you can just bring it in and they'll give you another unit right there same day. So that's something to consider. And they said, well, what if you don't have that particular model in stock? Oh, well, we'll give you something equivalent maybe from another vendor. Well, that's a problem, because if your drives are formatted for one vendor and you put it to a different vendor, you're probably going to have to reformat it, re-download your data. So it's still better, but you're going to have a few days downtime at least. So ideally, either a hot swap or having a guaranteed ability to replace it would be nice. And I'm not ruling out doing that at some point. But in the short term, right now, while my NAS is probably still in transit to California to get fixed, I started looking at different things to replace it with. So one of the things I did was I took the drives and decided to repurpose them at this point. So I put them in I've got a tower unit over here, which is my primary workstation. It's based on a Core i7-4790. It's really a gaming system, but I use it a lot, and I do play a few games. But I use it mostly for building software. I've got a lot of virtual machines running on it. It's always doing something. It's a powerful machine. I got 32 gigs of RAM in it. And I got a big tower case, and I've got a 512 gig SSD I boot off of it, but I didn't really have a lot of storage in it because I always kept it on the NAS. So I took these, and I think I got a 1 terabyte. I know I got a 1 terabyte drive in there also just for scratch data. So I went out and I bought I transferred the 16 terabytes of drives I had from my NAS into this box now. So now this box has 6 hard drives in it. I needed one additional, the reason I was at Fry's earlier, I needed one additional power cable for one of the SATA drives. So I put that in there. And the reason I did this, I wanted to try Windows Storage Spaces. Because if I'm going to build a server, I do need to make a choice at some point as to what operating system to use. So the obvious choices that are out there, at least initially, the first thing most people would say is, oh, go with FreeNAS. That's great. And I know people have had a lot of good luck with it. I think it's got pretty high memory requirements for what it does. 1 gigabyte per terabyte. But again, I've heard good things. I may actually try it. The second one that's out there that I've heard a lot of good things about is UnRaid. That's sort of the one I'm leaning against. But I also have a Windows 2012 R2 license sitting here that I could use. So I said, maybe a Windows server might be nice. Because I could consolidate my database server onto it. Perhaps even put an Active Directory in here. Network's getting big enough now. I could probably use an Active Directory server. I don't really have an Exchange server because I'm using Office 365 Cloud, so that's where that resides. So I said, let me give that a try. And the one thing that Windows Storage Server has, and it's now also in Windows 8 and Windows 10, is something called Storage Spaces. And what that is you take a pool of drives. It can be any drives. It can be your onboard SATAs. They don't have to be the same size. You can have a 4 terabyte, a 6 terabyte, 3 terabyte, and you can throw them all in the same pool. It could be an external USB drive. Just anything you can add to a storage pool. So in my case, I added in my 4 terabyte SATA drives to it, and I wanted to do some benchmarking. Okay, so Microsoft, for whatever reason, doesn't seem to like the term RAID. And to be fair, true RAID, you typically have to have same size drives. And that's sort of old school. It was like that even back in the 80s and 90s, probably more than 90s when I was working with this stuff originally. But other people try to get around it. So like in FreeNAS, they typically use something called ZFS. UnRaid has something different with it. But in the Windows world, there's something called storage spaces. So you add in your drives, and then you can go ahead and build a storage space. So in my case, I added 4 drives to storage space, and I said this is going to be one big drive. One neat feature about it, by the way, is you can go ahead and just say, I want to make this a 20 terabyte drive, even if you've only got 16 available, or 50 terabytes. And what happens is Windows, I'll show you, okay, fine, you want to have 50 terabytes? You've got 50 terabytes! Go ahead and start copying stuff to it. And you can copy all day long. When you start to run out of space, Windows will pop up and say, hey, I'm actually out of physical space, so you've got 20 terabytes in here now, and we don't have physical space to store the extra 30, so can you please add some drives? And you add some drives, and it just basically grows your available resources on your system. That's pretty cool. You've also got various fault-tolerant options. You've got two-way mirror, which is basically your typical RAID 1. So with a caveat. So if you have 2 drives, it's basically copied one over the other. Fault tolerance, one drive goes bad, your data's still there. There's two-way mirroring also, where any 2 drives go bad, and you have to have a minimum of 5 for this, but any 2 drives go bad, you've still got your data. Now, when I say there's a caveat, typically with RAID 1, you're going to have to have an even number of drives. You're going to have 2, where you have a mirror copy of each one. You can have 4, where you have 2 drives mirroring each other. In this case, you could even have 3, though. So what happens is basically it mirrors 1.5 drives and the other 1.5 drives. That's kind of cool. And then you've got something called parity, which is sort of what you would see with RAID 5. And when you get into Windows Server 2012, I don't want to get too off the deep end here. You can also use cluster servers. So you basically mirror the entire server. But I can do a whole presentation on that, but let's stop there. But what I wanted to do is see how the performance was on this beast. So I set up my 16 terabyte storage pool, and I set it for parity. And I started copying a boatload of files to it. And it started off at about 120 megabits per second, and I was like, oh, that's not too bad. And then after about 15 seconds, it just fell off a cliff, and it started copying between 25, 20, and 15. I mean, it was like USB 2 speeds. It was glacial. It would take forever to copy it. And it's well documented that the parity on Windows storage, Windows server pool storage spaces. It's late. It's 2:30 in the morning. So brain's not completely functioning. But Windows storage spaces with parity is really slow in the writes. And Microsoft says, oh, well, it takes a lot of processor power to calculate the parity bit. I got a few fundamental problems with that, and I do think this part of the product is a bit flawed. First, I checked the processor, it was barely getting hit at all. It's a 4790, it should have no problem doing this. And remember, this is software RAID, there's no hardware RAID card here, so you don't expect the same performance as you would with a dedicated hardware RAID card. And the second thing was the QNAP NAS I was talking about earlier. Thing's got a bloody dual-core or quad-core Celeron processor in it, and I was able to put RAID 5 in that and still get 100 megabit write times. So you can't tell me Microsoft can't do that on a Windows server. So anyway, I think parity is just fundamentally flawed with Windows Storage Spaces. So I said, okay, that's not going to happen. I looked at two-way mirror. I did a benchmark on that. Much better than parity, but we're talking 40, 50 megabit write times. Still not anywhere near where I wanted it to be, and I wasn't happy with it. So my whole idea at this point of saying, hey, let's build a Windows 2012 server, and that's going to be my NAS, I just wrote that off at that point. I'm not going to, unless I want to go out and buy a hardware RAID card, I don't see that working, at least from a performance perspective. Motherboard RAID cards, Intel rapid storage technology, that's gotten a lot better, but it's still basically, I won't say it's fake RAID like it used to be. There actually is some hardware controls in there. It's still not as good as a dedicated storage card. I will benchmark that at some point to compare. It's a bit more complicated to set up, not impossible. So I've already got the drives transferred into this box. I want to use them. So I said, okay, let's try the final step for Windows Storage Spaces, and that is what they call a simple setup. And what that means is you combine all your drives into one big volume, and there's absolutely no redundancy in it. So if I've got 4 terabyte drives, I then have 16 terabytes of usable space. So what's this mean? It's like, yes, I got all this space, that's great. But what's this mean? It means if I have 4 drives and any single drive fails, I lose everything. Okay? So is it going to be worth it? I don't know. I decided to do a benchmark. And I am getting insane write speeds and insane read speeds. I'm getting about 150 megabits a second writing and about up to 185 read. It's just, it's much faster than my NAS ever was. Now granted, these are local SATA drives. One other advantage I wanted to mention is you could build a Windows storage space on a computer, let's say on my Windows 10 box here, and if I want to transfer it over to a Windows 2012 server, I can just take that whole cluster of drives, put it in, and Windows will recognize it. So I do like the portability aspect. But anyway, I've got this Windows Storage Spaces simple setup with 4 drives, wicked fast, no fault tolerance. Am I going to use it? In this case, yeah, I am. I've already got a backup plan in place, so I'm giving up the fault tolerance just because to get fault tolerance, the price is just too much. It's too much of a performance hit for what I'm doing. So I'm going to keep this in place right now, and I'm going to keep Windows Automatic Backup doing at least nightly backups of everything out there. So I do have, I think, how many? 4 or 5 of those 5 terabyte USB external drives. It's going to get a nightly copy of everything that's on my Windows storage space. And then a little more long term, probably over the next couple weeks, I'm going to be, and I'll do a video on this, I'm going to be building a NAS, and I bought some of the parts for that today, like a proper NAS, and I'm going to put UnRaid on that. So like I just said, the whole Windows 2012, I've eliminated that just due to the storage space's performance. So now you understand how I've gone through today. In addition to everything from work, I've gone from my QNAP NAS just blowing up, and how in the course of about 24 hours I've kind of strategized on how I'm going to replace it. So I'm going to go ahead and build I went out and bought a motherboard, and I went with where is it over there? It's an AS Rock server board. It's got 8 SATA ports on it. It's based on an AMD chipset. I bought an A6 7600K AMD chip. Not a speed demon. I'm not playing games in this. It's going to be a server. And I got a power supply for it. I got to get a server case. I'm probably going to go pick up a rack mount one. I've got a rack in the server room, which right now it's just a bunch of plain boxes on a shelf. If I'm building it, I might as well build a rack mount case. So the only thing I need to pick up at this point is the actual case and hard drives, because I've repurposed the older hard drives into my rig behind me here. So I'll let you know how that works out. And then if and when the QNAP ever gets back here, not sure what I'm going to do with it yet. I might just throw 1 or 2 drives in there so I can do some remote access. I love the box. I hate to get rid of it, but I just don't trust it. Maybe I'll eBay it. I'm not sure. If I do decide I want to make that my primary box again, at least I've got another box now which can be a live backup, so I never lose access to my data again. 2 things: I have never lost my data, but I have lost access to it, because data sitting on an encrypted backup somewhere with no place to download it to is a bit of a problem. And also the drives never went bad. It was always logic boards or anything. So anyway, short version, been really busy all week. Glad that's over. I'm going to be a bit busy this weekend. That's fine. Other projects, I'm still finishing out the basement. I got to resurface my deck. Lots of stuff going on there. I had my NAS blow up, so I picked up 80% of the parts I need to build my NAS, and I'll go through that build. That's going to be a really inexpensive build, by the way. It's going to be a lot cheaper than buying my QNAP appliance in the first place. And I, just based on the power of the processor and what I got, I imagine it's going to be quite a bit more powerful. And then I gotta come up with things like, what do I do for cloud access and stuff. So lots of adventures we can explore there. Yeah, so that's about it. It's been a long freaking week. So looking forward to talking to you again. Hope you enjoyed sharing this crazy adventure with me. Take care.